Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mind, Body, and Roots. Today I have my mentor, my friend, and older brother, even I like to say, Seth Walbridge. He has taught me so much about dentistry, helped me get in dental school, and I have so many more compliments I'll probably give him throughout this podcast. But hey, Seth, please introduce yourself. Let's talk about you and your journey.
Sure. Thanks, Ahad, my brother. We look the same, right, Ahad?
Yeah, we do.
So, my name is Seth Walbridge. I'm currently a dentist in Easton, Pennsylvania, which is the home of Crayola Crayons. For those that don't know, it's right in the Pocono Mountain area, about an hour north of Philly, probably an hour west of New York City. And I'm also teaching currently. So, something I wish I would have done many moons ago. But I've been practicing dentistry for about 15 years.
Yeah, wow, that's crazy, Seth. When I met you, you were like year 7 or 6, I think,
Yeah.
right?
Probably, yeah, 7, 8, 9, something like that.
Yeah, because you just came to the area in 2015?
Yep, 2015 came to the Lehigh Valley area.
Yeah, and then I met you, and then things have just kind of skyrocketed from there. So, okay,
Yeah.
so Seth, kind of tell us a little bit about and you're a dentist, but you do so much more. You sit on multiple boards. You're on the ADA. Yeah, just start with everything because I don't even know. I've lost track.
Yeah, so basically, I'm heavily involved in organized dentistry, and I got my start. Believe it or not, my first job was in Erie, Pennsylvania, as a kind of a young dumb associate. My first associate job. They kind of took me for a ride, but I learned a lot, and I have no regrets. But I got involved with organized dentistry because I attended a dental society meeting in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I was basically said, "Well, what do you do that's fun around here?" And there wasn't a whole lot of good answers, I thought. So you kind of, a lesson I always teach was you kind of got to throw yourself into stuff sometimes. Try and get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's a phrase that I like to use. So they were like, okay, tough guy. Well, what's something fun you would do? And I set up it was like a running of the Santas, basically. So it was like a Santa bar crawl. And it ended up going really well. And then I got invited to do more stuff. And when I moved to the Lehigh Valley, which is where I am now in 2015, as you had mentioned earlier, same thing. I got into a group and, people weren't really, it didn't seem like people were having fun. It was always what, kind of nerdy educational thing are we going to do? And then they kind of looked at me and like, okay, well, what would you do? So I ended up setting up a murder mystery dinner.
Hmm.
And then from there, everyone had a good time. It was out of the box idea. And ended up taking off. So what eventually ended up happening was our trustee at the time was Linda Himmelberger, who I pretty much owe everything that I do in organized dentistry to her. But Linda appointed me to the ADA New Dentist Committee. So that's where I got my big start. I didn't really know what to expect. And that's how I got involved in the ADA. I was on the ADA New Dentist Committee. I was in the building. I got to meet all of the team members, staff members. And then eventually at the House of Delegates, they voted the chair of the new dentist committee as a voting member of the ADA Board of Trustees. So sure enough, it was me. So I had just had a child and I was getting ready to roll off the committee after the following year. And I was like, well, I'll be the chair. And I was lucky enough that my peers, thought I should be the chair of the committee. But then at that House of Delegates, they were like, "Oh, by the way, you're also a voting member of the ADA Board of Trustees." And I was like, "Shoot." So, but then same thing, you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So I learned, and then I was on the board as the ADA New Dentist Committee chair for a year, and that's where I really got to learn kind of the inner workings of the American Dental Association. And currently, the association's under a little bit of fire, mostly from these conspiracy theorists who have an agenda,
Hmm.
but they don't really know what goes on inside of the ADA as much as they want to say they do. So I was really lucky that I got to really learn how things work, what they're doing for everybody, the science behind, various councils, committees, the science, foundation that they have now, which is Forsyth Institute. There's just a lot of things to learn behind the scenes that now I truly appreciate what the association does.
So, I know there's a lot of backfire with like the whole, HD development with the new head and, fluoride. Is that some of the detractors you're talking about, or are there detractors within the dental community?
Within the dental community, so currently a big issue with kind of just dentistry in general is private equity. So a lot of people have a
Hmm.
problem with private equity in medicine and private equity in dentistry. And I get it. There are a lot of bad things about private equity. but I'm kind of one of those people that looks at both sides of the coin, and people associate private equity mostly with dental support organizations. I am not anti dental support organization. In fact, they do a lot for my colleagues and my peers. So that's where my mind goes, is a lot of these people, they're not a fan of dental support organizations, and I get it. They tend to push out a lot of things that these private practice owners would like. An example is, a lot of these large organizations get a lot of deals from companies, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot to it, but I'm not going to dive into it. But I kind of look at it as they're supporting my colleagues. I know, single mothers that have children, and these support organizations are helping them thrive. Whereas, there are certain private practices in her area that she had tried to work for, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
So when these people, I call them the conspiracy theorists, because they try and hide their agenda, but I know what their agenda is. They're anti dental support organization. They're anti private equity. Just say it. But what they're doing is they are making my colleagues feel inferior. And that's where I have to draw the line. They're kind of going into public spaces, they're talking bad about the ADA, but whenever they talk bad about these corporations, they just don't know how they're making my colleagues feel. They're
Mm,
making my colleagues feel like, because they work for one of these organizations, that they are a lesser dentist, or that they're pushing treatment plans through, that are unnecessary. Now, maybe some are. I don't know any of my colleagues that are doing that.
hmm
But that's kind of where my mind goes. I understand if people are against private equity and support organizations, what have you, but they're doing an awful lot to help people that I love.
mm,
So, and when these conspiracy theorists come in and kind of badmouth everything, it just kind of, I don't know, it kind of detracts from their message. Like, it makes me want to not listen to them, so to speak.
makes
So
sense.
it's just my take on it. I just want everyone to get along, and if
Yeah.
these corporations or these support organizations are helping my colleagues to thrive, especially, and I always bring up single mothers or people that have had injuries, or things like that, people that are just trying to pay their immense school debt off. We don't need to make them feel bad about who they're working for. We don't need to make them embarrassed to admit that they work for Aspen Dental or for Heartland or
hmm
something like that. That's where I have to draw the line.
Yeah. I get that. And honestly, like I used to be anti-DSO because of a lot of, I would say, statements from people that I've also seen. But I've also come to like understand and respect that for some people it's a need and it's a must, because private practices, although they run well, a lot of owners don't support their associates well. Whether it's health insurance, 401ks, time off, flexibility, these are things that matter to this generation. It's not just that workaholic mentality that a lot of old school dentists have that are current private practice owners. It's a lot of them are that. And I get that, I respect it. I also, we all work hard, but we have families to take care of, we have bills to pay, we have loans to pay off. And the thing is, these DSOs, whether they push treatment or not, that's a whole nother ball game or story. They're able to support dentists that have specific needs or wants that a private practice just can't, because they don't have the funding to do so. So I've changed my perspective and say, hey, listen, as important as private practice is, and I still think it is the golden standard in terms of quality, I also think that DSOs are catching up, because a lot of people that are retiring or leaving private practice, the quality, I would say, is heading towards those DSOs because they just can't afford to do the overheads and the lifestyle that their teams want. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because what happens is if we have one view on one thing and only one view of the other thing, we can never truly understand both sides and what each side provides to each certain individual or groups of people. So I think that is an important perspective, to sometimes step back and value that, hey, the DSOs have a place, private practice has a place, and you need to learn how to work together.
Exactly. I think everyone just needs to come together, and until that happens, it's going to be combative for a while, unfortunately. But
Unfortunately.
and I don't blame private practice owners. I feel bad because especially young dentists come out, they want all the bells and whistles,
Mm-hmm.
and these practices are able to provide it to them. I think we should do something to help our private practice doctors as well, because I don't want to see that go away. Some people are just
Correct.
uncomfortable going to a private practice. So
Yeah.
it's no fault on the owners, but
Mm-mm.
At the same time, let's not hate, or talk bad about dentists that are just choosing a different practice modality. I think everyone just needs to love each other.
Exactly. And I think the biggest thing is that maybe it's insurance companies that are giving a squeeze to private practice owners, to be honest with you. If anything, if we were to unite against a, I guess, common enemy, I'm saying in air quotes, it would probably be insurance because honestly, insurance is trying to find ways to cut costs and increase their own take home while not allowing us as doctors to take care of our patients. Because, it kills our overhead. Like, lab costs are going up, employee costs are going up. And unfortunately, we don't have that leverage like DSOs to negotiate those fees. But in reality, is if we were, I would say, like a smarter, no, not smarter is the word, a more educated and more unified organization, I think we could probably put a squeeze on insurance companies and be like, hey, listen, we need straight across a good fee so we can provide for our practice and our patients and our population. And we should work with DSOs to get that leverage because they have that current leverage, which we don't have.
And what a lot of people don't know is that the ADA is doing just that. So, but at the same time, you get the same, people bad mouthing, that they're in the same room together. So I kind of look at it as if you were, in a battle with another country or an organization, why wouldn't you want to be in the same room with them to learn kind of what they're thinking, so to speak? And I don't mean like, the insurance company is our arch enemy or anything like
Yeah.
that. But since the ADA is now having meetings with insurance companies or insurance company heads or, that sort of thing, now it's like, oh, well, the ADA is, in their pocket and all these things. I've been in the room. I can tell you it's almost comical to think of it that way. You want to be at the same table together because if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, so to speak. So why wouldn't I want to be in the same room with these people to learn what they're doing, learn what they're thinking? Hey, can we work together on this sort of thing? But I get it. A lot of people don't see it that way. I think it's completely silly to
Mm-hmm.
not want to be in the same room with these people that you're competing with sometimes. But hey, maybe we can find some common ground. That's just my 2 cents on it. And I know not everyone's going to agree with me on that.
Yeah. And that's totally fine. I mean, but you got to have that open dialogue so you can move forward. And I see their perspective too, but I think maybe as an olive branch we could be like, hey, listen, why don't you come sit in on these meetings? I mean, if they're not ADA members, be like, hey, like you're criticizing us, but why don't you come join us in these meetings and see what we are actually talking about? And maybe that'll change your perspective. I don't know. Maybe it's a thought to bring up to your biggest critics is to show them, hey, like these are the conversations. You're more than welcome to join, and we'd love for you to even give them your own feedback and what you're struggling as private practice owners.
Mhm.
And maybe it'd also give them a reason to join the ADA because I think organized dentistry, although I'm more attracted from it since moving down to Missouri, I still think that it's very important because if we're not organized, then unfortunately what's going to happen is we're going to end up a lot like medicine, and basically a lot of physicians aren't even part of the AMA. It's kind of a very broken down foundation,
Also,
unfortunately.
I also look at it kind of as it's generational too, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
it's like I look at it as, I hate to say insurance again, but I look at when I pay my membership to organized dentistry, it's like paying insurance for my organization. It's like your car, you pay insurance for
Mm-hmm.
your car. When I pay my membership, I kind of look at it as I'm insuring my profession, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's a generational issue because if you talk to our more seasoned, I don't like to say older, right? I always say seasoned. If you talk to our seasoned dentists, they're like, hey, I pay my membership because that's my duty, right? It's my duty to my profession. That's why the percentage of membership was so much higher, decades ago, what have you, years ago. But now the generation, no offense, like you and I are in that generation now where it's kind of like, well, what am I going to get out of this sort of thing? And if you can't provide that value to somebody, then why are they going to join? Whereas like I
Mm-hmm.
said earlier, that seasoned dentist is just like, well, I got to pay this because I don't want the profession of dentistry to go anywhere. I don't want insurance companies to take over my profession, that sort of thing. But that's not the mindset of a larger percentage of the younger generation. I'm 41, so I'm not in that younger generation per se, but I'm pretty darn close.
Mm-hmm.
You're there now, and that's just the reality of it. If you don't provide the value to the younger members, then they're not going to join. The ADA, the AMA, these things, they're just a little late to the game.
Mm-hmm.
How do you provide that value proposition. Now everyone's in a panic to provide it, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do you think, Seth, in the next 5 to 10 years, where do you think dentistry is going to be? In terms of lifestyle, let's say income, schooling, education, all that things. Like, what if you had to predict? None of us have a fortune teller's ball, but what would you say is going to happen?
Well, this is tough too because I also have a differing viewpoint on education. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these dental schools are getting, why would I pay all this money and you're not giving me the education I need. A problem is dental schools is 4 years, right? And you're taught to learn everything you can in those 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it, dental school could be 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, and this is very unpopular, dental school has to be at least 5 years
I
because
actually agree with you.
by the time you, at least five, maybe six, but by the time you learn the basics, you're ready to graduate,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, what about scanning, milling? What about implants and grafting and like all this? Like now that you've paid a gazillion dollars for dental school, you have to now pay so much more to just get caught up to reality,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. But now you take the dental schools themselves, right? So, and I went to Temple, so I'm just going to give you my perspective of Temple. Temple is running off of Medicaid. Temple is a Medicaid school, essentially. Public assistance, what have you. But you're asking this school to basically run off of each time a patient comes in, you're doing one or two composite or amalgam fillings for that price. But you're expecting this whole school to run on that, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're not doing like major procedures. So you're relying on essentially volume. But I just don't understand what people are looking at where they look at a school like this that's basically helping the public receiving 1/8 of their, regular fee. How are they supposed to run without you paying top dollar for the tuition? Are some schools way more expensive? Of course they are. And I'm not defending them, but sometimes we have to look on the other side of the coin and, not to be devil's advocate, but if you or I are students at Temple, that whole day we see two patients and we've done four fillings at a public service or Medicaid price. That's not very much money. So
Correct.
that school needs to rely on what? Tuition dollars to do things like pay their faculty and facilities. Now you have to have the latest and greatest in milling, digital technology. I mean, what are they expecting? Not to mention the Department of Education is getting gutted
Yeah.
currently. Like, where do they think this funding is coming from? Because I can tell you at these universities, that funding has to come from the top down. It's not like it goes straight to the dental school first, and the dental school is like, okay, we'll take this money because that's how much we need. No, they're getting the scraps essentially from the higher ups and expected to run, efficiently. So I think before people start knocking the dental schools even for their high tuition charges, they just need to look on the other side of the coin at least a little bit.
Yeah. Honestly, NYU is, I think, the number 3 or 4 expensive bus school behind Midwestern and maybe some other ones. But that is a big issue, right? Like the DOE is gutted. We're not putting emphasis on education. And honestly, dental school being 5, 6 years, probably, I might get hate for this, medical school too, 5, 6 years. I think it'd be the best thing ever. Because if you look at it, the UK, Italy, just put the European Union, and you can even say Asian, all of their education is about 6 years. There's no college. There really isn't, and this is an unpopular opinion. I probably will get blasted for it in any way, shape, or form, but I think college is a waste of time for like someone that wants to go into medicine or dentistry, unless you like have like a business background or something that might help you in practice. But for the majority of people that want to go into healthcare, it's genuinely a waste of time because you don't learn anything very applicable. And so if your education was 5 to 6 years, you could do your didactics in your first 2 years and then do clinical work for the next four. And then you wouldn't really even need a general practice residency. I mean, it'd be good to have a GPR so you can learn even more advanced skills and kind of transition from school into private practice. I think it'd be still nice to do it. But I agree with you on that. I've always believed that college was the biggest waste of my time. The only thing I learned from it was business, which was nice to have, but even that, it only helps so much because healthcare is just a whole different beast, you know? It is a business, but it's a different kind of business.
Mhm.
So what I will say is I wish school was longer because it would have been nice to learn implantology or surgery, spend more time with OS faculty and all these little nuances of dentistry that do pay well when you leave outside for private practice or these DSOs. So yeah, and yes, cost is going up and it's not fun and maybe it's not as worth it as it used to be. But there has to be a way for funding to help pay for faculty, to pay for the latest and greatest of instruments, because they're expensive. Like, those approximators you gifted me a while ago, Seth, I still use them. I use them every big surgery case, and I think of you. But I was trying to get another set, and I'm like, well, these are pricey. Yeah, they're expensive.
Mhm.
But those, like, and imagine that like a X scale or like a 500X scale. It's expensive. So where does that money come from, right? And
Mhm.
so tuition's going to rise, unfortunately. And I wish it could get cheaper, but I don't know if it's something that will happen anytime soon.
Mhm. So I'm going to disagree with you just a little bit.
Sure.
Um, I hold a high value for my undergraduate education, but I get it. What I do agree with you is um, it's more of an experience, right?
Uh
Like
huh.
undergraduate education is more of an experience. But as you said, I do agree with you in that a lot of the classes might not. I
Hmm.
went to a liberal arts college, and you were required to take a lot of classes that
Correct.
weren't in your major and had no relation to what you were doing, right? So if you could cut those out, you'd probably save a lot of money on
Hmm.
your undergraduate education. So in that regard, I definitely agree with you. But if we make dental school 5 or 6 years and are able to keep the tuition's high, I get it, and I'm not pro the high tuition. I
Yeah.
understand why it's that way, right? And not everywhere. Like some of these more privately funded dental schools, like they don't need to have the high
No.
education, but a lot of these public ones, they need help to
Yeah.
do things, and I've seen it at Temple. So, but if we could keep, even if it's high, even if the cost is high, if you could then turn that into maybe dental schools 5 years
Hmm.
at that price, put a value on the cost, for this high cost, it's 5 or 6 years, then I could see it going now. But I don't know. Maybe we got to save money on the back end in undergrad to move forward. I don't know. There is no good answer from me. It's easy for me to talk about it, right? But
Yeah.
I don't have a great answer for how we move forward, especially now when things financially and the Department of Education are in such turmoil
Correct.
going on with the
Yeah.
administration right now. I don't even want to speak out of turn. You know what I mean? In fear of being deported to another country or something like that.
That is fair. A wild time, Seth. But what I will say, it's interesting because I think there is no good answer. But I think the biggest thing is if we do see changes, I think the biggest changes need to be in education at a whole, starting from, your high school and your middle school and, ramping it up from college and professional degrees. I think that's the only way that, as a country, we can actually start to compete on an international level. Because right now, I think we're really behind in education with high tuition
Right.
costs. And then that's just an education problem. It has nothing to do with even who's in power, which administration or what have you. It's just, I think it's a lack of principle and a lack of goal setting, which is now starting to bite us in the butt, unfortunately, for the last like 2 or 3 decades previous. That's really what it comes down to is like it just wasn't properly planned and executed. And now I think it's my generation and your generation partially and the forthcoming generations who are going to have to suffer for that,
Mm. I
you know?
think I think complacency too. I think
Mm-hmm.
people were kind of comfortable with the status quo, so to speak, and
Yeah.
now people are panicking. Like, oh my gosh, we're so far behind now. So we need to make extreme changes in order to get to where we're going. And to be honest, I think we do need to make some big changes to get there. What are those changes? I have thoughts, but I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because we can always think and brainstorm and mention it, but until we start executing, we're just going to be stuck in that thought cycle, you know? And so, what we can do is in our respective organizations and professional societies, I think is the best way is to just address change and just mention it and just hopefully something happens, something changes, whether it's during our time or in the future, but at least we said it. It makes that spark of a change. But yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on that and your thoughts on that. So, okay, so Seth, you do ADA stuff, you do private practice, you teach. Do you sit with any other companies? What else do you do? Like, I know you're literally an octopus. You've got like 8 arms, even though technically you have two.
Well, first and foremost, I'm a dad, right?
Okay.
So. My wife is a critical care anesthesiologist, so she has a wacky, job and hours, that sort of thing. But I was doing private practice for, going on 15 years, and we had a chat, and it was, I should probably back off a little bit so we can raise our children, right? Because we don't have family in the area. So first and foremost, I'm a dad, so I love that. I'm a teacher, so I help teach at a hygiene program,
Hmm.
residency here and there. But I spend a lot of time with hygienists, so that's another big problem we have in the country is how we're treating our hygienists, how these hygienists feel like they've been treated. So I'm on the front lines with the hygienists, trying to help them out, trying to kind of get the olive branch out there. I'm also involved with the International College of Dentists, which I have a lot of fun with. And then I'm on the International College of Dentists Foundation, which I had my first meeting with them on their board of trustees. And that was just so awesome to be in a group where there's no drama or anything else. It's just how do we help people? That's the goal. And everyone in the room is like, how do we help people? There's no drama, there's no agendas, so to speak. So I'm involved with them currently, and that's a lot of fun. I'm also on the Pennsylvania Dental Association Board of Trustees. So, trying to help with, new ideas and things like that on the Board of Trustees for Pennsylvania. I help run the triage unit for the Missions of Mercy in
Hmm.
Pennsylvania. That's coming up this June. So, I'll be running the dental triage unit. So I remember you were there with me before.
Yeah.
Usually we do over $1 million of free dental care for people. Just a big theme of like where I am in my career is just giving back. I'm kind
Mm.
of fortunate that my wife has a job, and financially we're able to be very supportive of our children and what we do, because now my whole goal is to back off of the more private practice dentistry and just contribute to help people across the country. So,
Makes
and
sense.
that's just where my heart is, and I have a really good life balance in doing so. I still keep in touch with private practices that I've been affiliated with as an associate, and if someone needs me to cover their office, I'm there. And I don't expect payment. I usually cover their office for a week or two, what have you, and I don't want anything in return. A lot of these private practices, they can't afford someone to come in and pay them, exorbitant amounts of money to keep their office open. So I'm just like, you know what? Let's go to dinner or something, and we'll call it a day.
Call it a
But
day.
that's pretty. As far as I'm just kind of racking my brain off the top of my head. Those are the things that really come to mind that I'm involved with. Other than just trying to, like, as a dentist, you want to stay in shape a little bit, stay a little bit mobile, because over time dentistry can take a real toll on the body as well. So.
Yeah. And speaking of body set, like I know like you did a lot of athletics, and so I kind of want to transition into that. So, what did you when you were more practicing? What did you do to stay fit? What do you do now? What has changed?
Mhm.
And, what do you suggest to other people listening to the podcast?
So growing up, I've always been ultra competitive,
Mm-hmm.
and not just like in sports, but I mean even in like school. Like I always wanted to be the best at everything, and it kind of became an obsession. And I wouldn't recommend this to everybody, right? But that was kind of my driver into getting into fitness. So I was big into rugby and basketball, and there was always like weight training where we would go in, and you would hit the weights and jump rope, whatever. I always wanted to be the best. Like I wanted to lift the most weight. I wanted to get the most jump rope reps in a row in the time limit. If we were running drills, I always wanted to finish before the time expired. And the coach would put the time like something utterly ridiculous where you wouldn't be able to finish it in time. But I was like, almost making myself vomit trying to beat that time. But just very competitive over time. But that got me really into weight training. So my first love is weight training. So I train probably 4 days a week on weights, and then cardio is kind of like my next thing. I was never really into mobility training,
Mm-hmm.
stretching, that sort of thing, which is something that I'm getting more into now. But I'm a big inline skater. I don't care who makes fun of me. I'm a big rollerblader. And then I got into biking. I'm not really a big runner. I ran a marathon. I was like 230 pounds, and now I have like a chronic Achilles issues. Now it's less impact stuff, like some minor jump roping, rollerblading, biking, and weight training. I never miss a weight training session, but I was into calisthenics for a while, which I'd highly recommend to anyone who maybe isn't fortunate enough to have a gym in their house, or they're embarrassed to go out to the gym. You can get into any kind of calisthenics training for very little. And that's kind of where I started. And I still kind of go back to my roots of calisthenics. I always include some kind of body weight training for what I'm doing. But that's honestly, I'm fortunate that I don't have any, ailments that I'm aware of physically from doing dentistry. And I have friends that have been doing this for 15 years and they have to take Motrin to get through the day. I'm fortunate enough to not have to do that. But my biggest recommendation to anyone, doesn't even have to be a dentist, but
Mhm.
I think weight training is not done enough by people in it, because a lot of people affiliate it with like being a bro, or if I lift heavy weights I'm going to get really big. It's just not the case. And I think that's, if we could get by that, people would be a lot healthier. Their bodies would be a lot healthier if they added some resistance training. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but resistance training is kind of my love, and I think I've benefited a lot from it.
Makes sense. So,
Mhm.
like, I'm like you. I've been a weightlifter for quite a while myself. I think 2014 is when I started. Um, I mean, on and off, and then I started getting strict with it in dental school, and then now personally. But I think weightlifting and mobility, for me, mobility is even more important than even running. Like, although I enjoy running, not crazy miles, but I do enjoy, to say, heart health wise. But I think mobility is like the biggest thing. I think like people take stretching for granted and say it's girly, blah blah blah. But as you get older, I'm so grateful that I started in my 20s, because I can still stretch and be mobile even after an injury. Like I recover pretty quick because of that mobility training. Knock on wood. But I will say, yeah, I agree with you. Strength training, mobility, massive. And I think if the sooner you start, the earlier you start, the healthier you are. You don't have as many issues as you age.
And I have to just, for clarity here, just so everyone knows I'm telling the truth, I am the least flexible human. I bring up mobility because I need it. Like, I need to get more mobile.
Mm,
I am not mobile currently. And that's why I'm recommending it to people, because what little I have done, I've seen the benefits of, and my friends that can, contort themselves in half. Not only is it cool, but you know, they're doing really well, health wise with their bodies. So definitely get into that mobility training. I'm doing it now. I wish I would have done it sooner.
yeah. I wish I would have started as a younger person too. I did start enough, but I wish I would have even started sooner rather than later. Hey, you learn, you live and you learn, and I think that's the biggest thing. So, okay, Seth, do you have any goals like mud runs, or what are they called? Tough mudders, marathons upcoming, anything cool, anything unique you want to do the next couple, like year or 6 months?
I've been there. I've done the tough mutter, that sort of thing. I think I'm a little bit, I don't want to say old for that, because then someone will be like, you're never too old. But I'm more focused on, I think, biking. I really like, I've done a few of it's called the MS 150 for multiple sclerosis, but a lot of fun doing that. And once I did a few of these bike rides, I really developed a passion for that. And they're all over the country. So MS 150 is a big one, but anything biking, a long distance or for a day. I think the MS 150 that I always do is, it's like 85 miles one day and then 65 miles the next day. You stay overnight, where I went to undergrad at
Hmm.
Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania. So you start in Pittsburgh, you go to Meadville, and then you go to my hometown, Ohio, on Lake Erie. So
Hmm.
that's a goal of mine, though, would be to do more of these bike rides. And then obviously I got to get more mobile. I would like, it sounds corny, but I'd like to be able to do the splits. I think that would be cool to be able to do something like that.
Like a full split?
Like a full split. I'm 6'1",
Yeah, you're
you
a
know,
big guy.
195 pounds or 200 pounds. My friends all make fun of me for it, but I would just like to be more mobile, that sort of thing. So I think that's a big goal of mine. At my age, I might not be old, but I'm not young. Just to be more healthy, more mobile. Because when you have kids, you want to be there for your kids. So it's another goal of mine. Is I'd like to grow old to see my kids grow up. And I think anyone, like, who can't get on board with that sort of thing.
Yeah, I like that, Seth. Honestly, like I think mobility, stretching, lifting, all these little things, man, like it just helps you outlive. I think it's the word, and it's a good term to have in your bucket, because you want to see like the big things in your children's lives, right? Like that's the big thing. Like your parents got to see it, And so you want to be able to do the same thing. And I think that that in itself is pretty honorable. And speaking of which, I think there's a book that you might want to read. You might like it. It's called Outlive by Peter Attia.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've read it before, but I highly
No,
recommend that book.
no.
Highly recommend it. You'd like it. It's a little bit of a medicine approach to living a better life. And he
Okay.
talks about like lifting and mobility and diet and obviously genetics play a factor, but it's a very good book.
Hmm. Now my diet could definitely improve. Although I'm a dentist, I'm a big sugar guy. Anything birthday cake flavored, I'm a sucker for.
Just like
So you know what? I'm going to throw that goal on there as well, my friend. I'm going to throw maybe a little bit more healthy eating
healthy eating.
habits. I'm always trying consistency with I'm always consistent with lifting, and I'm always consistent with that stuff. Consistency with my diet would be not only a good goal of mine, but it'd probably help me live a little longer as well. So I'm going to throw that one on top of there. All right. Okay. I'm game. I'm doing things like brushing my teeth when I get hungry. I'm kind of really going to extremes. Or I'll try and like pound 3 glasses of water to like get rid of my hunger or something.
You're making it too hard, Seth. Like I'm
It's
like you.
not
I have a sweet tooth, but there's two things I found. Do you go to Costco? Random question.
yeah, like we have a
Sam's
Sam's
Club.
Club by us.
So I'll have to send you the link. But there's these little peanut butter cups, dark chocolate. They're 70 calories only. I have like that. I've got these figs that are dark chocolate, like 80 calories, and the carbs aren't bad, the sugars aren't bad. I'm like, you know what? I have a sweet tooth, but I just gotta find healthier alternatives. And honestly, that like gets most of the cravings out. So
Hmm.
it's great.
Hey, I'm open to suggestions. I'm a very open minded guy, so
I will send you all three of them. I think they're
send
really
'em.
good. It's changed the way I eat. Like people's like, oh, you're not fun. Like you don't eat all the fun stuff. It's like I don't need the fun stuff. I just have a sweet tooth I gotta, get rid of and call it a day. My friend, have you heard of the Ninja Creamy, by the way? Speaking of, so okay, this is something you might want to buy. Again, Costco or Ninja. It's basically you throw in like 3 or 4 ingredients. It makes protein ice cream for you.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
What's
and
it
it's kind
called?
of cool. Ninja Creamy.
Okay,
Yeah, it's kind of
I'll look
cool.
into it. I'm a big ice
Yeah.
cream fan, so
Huh?
I'm a big ice cream fan.
I know you are. So I'm
So I
saying
need to.
if you get like something like birthday cake flavored, you'll have a birthday cake ice cream and you're good to go.
All right, I'm
And
in.
so it's kind of cool stuff, man. I love talking about like body stuff and fitness stuff. It's been a crux. And I think the one thing I've realized, people that work out are also more disciplined and they're consistent in the things they say and they do, and it impacts us as people and our communities.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's that. Okay. Next thing I want to transition to, Seth, if you're cool with it, is I want to talk about how you grew up. So you grew up in Conneaut, Ohio. Tell us
Hmm.
a little bit about that. What was that like going to college, going to
Hmm.
Philadelphia for dental school, and just kind of about your life? Like, did you have struggles? You know my story of being, a brown Pakistani guy growing up in basically rural Pennsylvania, and now it's like more suburban, but it's changed. But what was your story? Like, kind of tell us about that.
I would say I had an easy life growing up. I would say, I come from definitely a middle class, maybe lower middle class. I'd say middle class family.
Mm-hmm.
My father was a carpenter my whole life. He worked at a nuke plant, plant for pretty much my whole upbringing. My mother was able to stay home with us for a time. She was a medical secretary at a hospital, at a chiropractor's office, various places. But I had an older sister. We've always got along. I had just a really good upbringing. I always had a good set of friends that I keep in touch with today. I get a lot of compliments actually about friends that I'm able to stay in touch with. Oh, you still keep in touch with those people that you met when you were 5? Yeah. So I've been really lucky in that regard. I grew up in a small town called Conneaut, Ohio, where, we were able to basically leave our house and it was like, be home when those street lights come on, so to speak. As long as my parents knew where I was or who I was with, the parents kept in touch. So if I was like, hey, I'm going to Tim's house, she's like, okay, like when those streetlights come on, you better be back in this house, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I had growing up was sports were always huge in my town. There was always youth sports, youth organizations, that sort of thing. And that's how I made my friend groups was through sports. Not
Hmm.
everyone has that. That's why I think I was always pretty lucky because my parents always had me involved in something, whether it was wrestling, basketball, football, rugby a little bit later in life. I attribute a lot of my upbringing to sports and coaches, along with my parents. So, same thing. From a young age, I was always competitive. I remember vividly, I remember in fifth grade, I never really cared about grades too much. And then, like, we got our report cards, and one of my friends, got like one more A than I got. And it was just out of nowhere. It was like the switch flipped where I needed to be that person, right? I needed to have all the A's. Then it was, I needed to run the fastest. And I was never like the fastest guy, but my father always said, you don't have to be the strongest, you don't have to be the fastest, but if you can be the smartest, that's what really matters. So I always just tried to focus on my grades, and school was always important. And I always found school fun. At a young age, if I had to miss school, I was always scared, or, not because I thought my parents were going to be mad, but I was afraid to fall behind in anything school related. I needed to like do my homework. I never wanted to have extra homework or anything like that. I never wanted to get in trouble. And that was it. I mean, that's really like my whole upbringing was always involved in sports, always do your best in school, and who I surrounded myself with. My friends were always the same way. Good students, cared about people. We always had friends that like weren't involved in sports, and we would always kind of try and bring them into our circles. So that was always important too. To always kind of lift people up around you that maybe didn't have as much. And that was just always very like from a young age, if people weren't doing that, I'm like, you're not like helping someone, that wants to play with you or that has less than you. Like, I don't know. It's just, I was always blessed. So in that regard, after all that, I think I had a pretty easy upbringing. We didn't have everything, but we weren't poor either, so I'm blessed, and I'm never like, woe is me. I had like this hard life. I really didn't. My parents gave us most of what we wanted. My first car was like a car that had 150,000 miles on it, like a beater car. It didn't matter, because I had a good set of friends and, people that cared about me. But then I ended up going to Allegheny College for undergrad, heavily liberal arts, related school. Loved it. I'm not ashamed to admit I'm very liberal person politically, but the school was very eye opening. Same thing, liberal arts. So a lot of classes that were unrelated to what I wanted to do with dentistry, but I had a great time. But the kicker with my upbringing was very white. I think we had two black students in my high
Wow.
school. When I got into undergrad, I was on cloud nine because my first, friend was his name was Sheil Patel. He went by Chico. And yeah, so Chico's actually getting married this summer, the
Wow.
end of May, and I'm going to the wedding. But he was my first. You say brown, so he was my first like brown friend, right?
Yeah.
So Chico's from his family's from India, and Chico was from Alabama. And so he had like I stereotyped him because I thought he was going to sound a certain way. And when he came up and introduced himself, he had this hard Southern accent from Alabama, and that was the most eye opening thing for me in undergrad, which is why I value my undergrad so much, was because that was my first taste of diversity. So I had no diversity growing up. No fault to anyone. That's just how my town was. It was all white factory workers, basically. So when I hit undergrad, man, it was just amazing. Like my friend from India, we had food from India. I had a lady from Pakistan was a good friend of mine, and so we had food from Pakistan. I mean, it was just like my friend Uzoma. She was from, her family was from Mogadishu. It was just like
Mm.
all these people kind of coming together that I got to know, and that's just one of my greatest memories. And having that diversity in my life, like I'll I value that so much now. I want that for my children as well.
Mm.
So, but then I didn't get into dental school my first year I applied. So while I valued my undergrad, I was kind of like, they told me that by going to the school, if I had a lesser GPA, it would help me get into dental school. Not true, right? Like you could have gone to any school, and as long as your GPA was high, you
Yeah.
could get. So hitting dental school now took me a year of not getting in. So I was able to stay home. I worked in a sheet metal factory, and I drove a forklift. That's what I did for my year off. I took some courses. I took gross anatomy, and then eventually I applied again, and I was able to get in. I had a high DAT, standardized test score. So I was able to get into dental school then. And then in dental school, it was hard. I wasn't the smartest guy, but I just kind of stuck to it and got through school. I didn't really want to specialize in anything. I really liked just doing everything. And then I ended up working as an associate in, an office in Erie, an office in Pittsburgh, two offices in Pittsburgh, and then my wife got into a fellowship program in Michigan, so I got a taste of like private practice dentistry, prison dentistry, just a variety of things, public health, etc. So that's kind of my journey, and then we settled on the Lehigh Valley for where we were going to kind of put our roots down. So in a nutshell, that's kind of my how I was brought up and my short-winded journey to get to where we are today. I hope that helps.
That does help a lot, actually. So. Okay, can you give me one unforgettable moment in college that you had, and in dental school, and one difficult moment in college, and one difficult moment in dental school? So one of each.
So one difficult and one, what was the other one?
Wonderful, or like something that was magnificent for you.
Gotcha. So like good and bad.
Good
So
and bad.
yeah. So a bad moment I had in college was my first failure. So I was super competitive,
Mm-hmm.
grade wise, but in college I ended up taking a calculus test and failing it. So like killer, like I would say put me into a borderline depression. So that was hard, but it's not the most difficult thing in the world. Like I could have worked harder, or if I didn't understand the concept, I should have asked a question, that sort of thing. But that was enough to send me into depression, honestly. Just failing that one thing, and then I'm like, oh my god, like I need to drop this course now. I need to, whatever. What ended up happening was I ended up getting through the course. I ended up with like a C or something, but I ended up retaking it. So it was calculus 2. So I ended up retaking the course, doing really well, and things ended up working out. But I would easily say a dark time for me. I was not talking to people. It was just that first taste of failure that I had to get through, and that's like a first world problem. You know what I mean? That's not the end of the world. A course. Nothing like bad physically happened or anything like that. So, but that was traumatic for me. That's something that I'll always remember. Probably one of the best things that happened for me was in college was I received this Cornerstone award, and that was just a big like right before I was going to graduate, and it meant a lot to me because I had parents were there, and it was in the middle of a football field. There were a lot of people everywhere, and I was being recognized for basically being a good person at
Hmm.
this school. So I don't always want a lot of recognition. I kind of like to do things and kind of like hide a little bit, but that was big for me just to receive that award. And my friends were there, and they were kind of making fun of me here and there. That was big. But in dental school, I had a friend kill himself,
Mm-hmm.
so that was my big tragedy there. And it wasn't someone in dental school, but it was a friend of mine while I was in dental school.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't a dental student, but when I was in there, I had a friend kill himself, and same thing. I was depressed, um, trying to tough through it too, right? So like, wasn't talking to anybody. I was just eating poorly, didn't care about anything, shut myself in my room. I'd watch TV or like play a video game that I didn't need to play, something to that effect. But that was definitely, if anyone, I wouldn't wish having to deal with that on anybody. I was angry, like can't believe he did that. I was pissed off at the world. So that was just something to get through. Same thing. I wouldn't want anyone to have to deal with that. And then getting through dental school, once I knew I was going to have to stay late at the school, I think this is one of the best things that happened to me because um, I ended up really focusing and felt good about what I was doing. So when I was in school, I ended up having to stay like 6 weeks longer than the graduation time. So that was probably one of the biggest blessings for me because I got to spend more time there and really, really focus on what I enjoyed. So I got to spend more time with friends as well. So I just remember that being a really good time for me in dental school. I didn't have a bad dental school experience. It's hard. It was
Mm-hmm.
hard. It was hard for everybody. I don't care what anyone says. It wasn't easy for anybody. I don't dislike my experience in dental school. There's a lot of people like, I'm never going to give to my dental school. Don't ask me for any money. But I just don't feel that way. I wouldn't be where I am without the experiences that I had. So I'll always be grateful for those.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, everyone's experiences are different, and I would say that like each failure or setback or positive experience, it kind of shapes us into the person that we are today.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and I think like we don't, as people, and I'm generalizing here, but not a lot of people sit back and reflect on the things that have happened, and like the lessons they learned. Because I think if we do that, we get a different perspective. Because like in that moment, it might suck or it might feel really bad or it might bring us joy or happiness, but we look back and like, did it actually do that or was that just me in that moment? And I think that sitting on those type of moments in your life, it kind of helps you grow as a person, and that's what life's about, is to grow.
I agree because I'm sure you've done this too, where
Hmm.
things aren't going your way or, things are hard.
Hmm.
I was, I heard this concept called the powerful other, where
Hmm.
there's always this powerful other person that did this to you, right? In dentistry, it's always like, well, this dentist ruined my teeth and now I want you to fix it. That's the powerful other. And I think what I was going through was a lot of this professor doesn't like me or they don't know what they're talking about and I'm always right sort of thing. But now that I'm in like my 40s and I'm looking back, I'm like, man, like that was me, or like I didn't work hard enough there, or I should have asked this question, or, that sort of thing. I think I wasn't self reflecting at the time, which when you're younger, you might not understand that concept. And I definitely didn't. But I think if a lot more people just looked inside or like looked to themselves rather than blaming, um, that it would be so different. The world would be a better place. And I'm guilty of that. Like I was always like, this can't be me. Like it has to be someone else's problem or someone hates me. Whereas if we would just reflect and kind of like, hey, maybe I can do better. Just well, what a difference it would make. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay, Seth, to kind of tie things up, I have a couple last few questions. So, my first one is, who is Seth in one word and why?
In one word,
Only
I would
one.
say compassionate. I would say compassionate. I care big time about other people, not so much about what they think,
Mm,
but I am more mentally well when everyone is on like the same playing field. You get a lot of people out there that are kind of like they're thriving when like they're making more money than others, or they're thriving when they're better than others, or they're the better teacher, or they know more. Like I just not that's just not where I live. It's not the world I live in. I need everyone to be like the same or
mm-hmm,
doing well. Like I get sad when I teach a lot of students now, but when one student is doing way better than the others, or when students aren't doing well, like I get sad about that.
mm-hmm,
I need them, or if I have to like, I teach hygienists how to do dental anesthesia. And if I have to fail like 4 or 5 students because they didn't get their IA blocks correct or something like that I don't feel good about that. You know what I
mm-hmm.
mean? I need people to be doing well, and I need people around me to be doing well. And if they're not doing well, I want to help them to do well. And sometimes people don't want to be helped, right?
Yeah,
Or I'm not the one that can be helping them with this specific issue. So to tie back to your question, I'm just very compassionate about
yeah.
others. I need everyone to be doing well.
Yeah, I agree with you. You are a very compassionate person. It's not even a question. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for your compassion. Like you helped
Thanks,
me and
man.
you pushed me through things that I was like, Seth, I don't know if I can do this. And you'd be like, Ahad, you can do this. You can do this. Come on. And like you'd pick me up when I was down. So I agree with you on that. Okay. So my follow up to that question then is, when you die, because we all die,
Mhm.
what do you want it to say on your gravestone? And if your kids are watching this in 10, 15 years, like, this is what I thought back in the day, or this is what I still think. So what would your gravestone, your epitaph say, and
My
why?
gravestone, man, it'd have to be short, kind of short and sweet. My gravestone, what a good question. Yikes. Maybe I'd be cremated.
Well, hey, that is a possibility too.
That might be more my. In fact, a lot of my family are cremated. I guess my gravestone, I guess on it would just be he was a good person.
I love that.
I just want like Seth Walbridge. He was a good person, and
I
I
love
think
that.
that's all I would need. I don't want it to be fancy. I just want or my kids. They're older and they go to my grave. We'll say right,
Yeah.
and it just says, you know what, Seth, he was a good person. I think that's all I need. And a quote that I like, one of my professors at Temple actually said, it's, I won't judge my progress on material ends, but I'll judge myself by how my children describe me to their friends. And it was something along those lines. That always kind of sits with me, where I want my kids to kind of grow up describing me to their friends,
Yeah.
in a positive light, or like, my dad did this or that. And I guess that could tie to like other people too, right? I would want other people to, not that I care big time what other people think of me, but I would hope that people thought that I treated them well.
Yeah.
That would be my big. People won't remember what you said or what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And
Maya Angelou.
yeah, Maya Angelou. And I hope that people would think, hey, that guy, like, he stuck up for me, or he stood for, good things. I hope that, that they would think that I treated them well.
Yeah. I like that, Seth. I really do like that. That is you in a nutshell. That
Yeah.
and compassionate.
Mm.
And I think you're doing a good job of leaving that legacy behind. So
I hope so.
kudos to you, man. I really do appreciate it. So, okay, last thing before I let you go and get on with your day, is there any piece of advice you have for the audience? Any small little tidbit you've picked up in the last like 20 years of your life or so? Anything that you think is very highlight or important?
Yeah, and I'm gonna, the typical, like, I'm a dad sort of thing, like, and not that I know more than someone because I'm a father, right? But it's at that point that I realized that work is like 10th or 20th on my list. I think people, and it could be the generation mindset too, right? Because basically the simple term is work to live, don't live to work, sort of thing. Whereas when I was out of school, I was like, hell bent on paying off my loans in a record amount of time and being the best dentist ever, and that sort of thing. Then I had kids and I was like, man, like, what was I doing? I can't be doing that anymore. Like, I need to enjoy life, a little more. And maybe dentisting is what people do to enjoy life, but don't, I would just say, don't live to work, man. Because a lot of people, I read about how when they're on their deathbed, or when they're, what would you do? What is your biggest regret? And it was kind of like not enjoying life. I definitely don't want to regret that. So, kind of a, textbook answer, but I just recommend people, like, you got to get out there and just live. Don't, take some chances. I always say, try and be comfortable being uncomfortable. Get to know people that don't look like you, and just enjoy life. Do not, live to work. Make sure you work to live. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I love that, Seth, because I think like we talk about work life balance, but I don't think that's the correct term. I'm a big believer in something I picked up in actually another podcast or book. I can't exactly remember, but work life harmony, I don't
Yeah.
think life is a balancing act. I think it's figuring out what works for you and your family's needs or whomever's needs and trying to make it fit in that moment. And that changes with with circumstances, as financial or religious or what have you. But it's about finding the harmonious piece and making it just work. And I think you found that in your life, and I'm really, really happy for you. And I think
Yeah.
you being a dad is a blessing for your kids and your
Mhm.
family because you are. I already know you're an amazing father. Kudos to you.
I try, but yeah, it's definitely been eye opening, and a blessing. So, and no offense to people, if you're not a parent, you don't have to be a parent, But by all means, like, please, like, don't feel like you have to be a parent. But for me, it's been a big life change for the better.
Absolutely. But hey, Seth, thank you so much for coming on the show and spending about an hour and some change with me.
Yeah, it's just fun, man.
I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
have a lot of fun putting this together for us, and I'll share it with you. But thank you so much to the Mind, Body, and Roots audience. I appreciate you tuning in for an hour and plus some change. Until next time, be well, my friends, and take care.
Thanks,